Okay, so I will kick off the meeting. Welcome everyone to the IARPIC Environmental Intelligence Collaboration Team April meeting. My name is Andrew. I am a Canals Fellow with Marine Fisheries in NOAA, and I'm also a member of the IARPIC Secretariat for Environmental Intelligence Collaboration Team. Pretty sure everyone knows everything about Zoom, but once again, please stay muted. If you are not speaking, you may raise your hand if you wish to add something in the middle of someone talking, or use the chat. And if you have any questions, feel free to chat me personally about tech issues. So to kick off today, let me make sure I have my agenda up. So we're going to start off with a roll call, which we'll do by time zone, since we don't have as many people here. So we'll just do a verbal roll call. So I could get everyone in Alaska to state their name.
Yeah, this is Molly McCammon with Alaska Ocean Observing System, and I'm one of the co-leads of the EI collaboration team.
Any other Alaska folks?
Hi, this is Karen Smith. I'm with the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, Environmental Sciences Management section.
Thank you.
Good morning, Drew. Bob Foy is on from the Alaska Fisheries Science Center.
Hi, Bob.
And Jill Pruitt, also from the Alaska Ocean Observing System.
Great. Any other Alaska folks? All right, moving on Pacific time. Any takers for Pacific time? All right, moving on to Mountain time. Any members calling from Mountain time?
Yeah, hello everyone. This is Matthew Druckenmiller calling in from the National Snow and Ice Data Center at CU Boulder.
Thank you, Matt. Any more for Mountain time? Okay, any folks calling from Central time? No, and Eastern time.
Jackie Grabmeyer, Chesapeake Biological Lab, University of Maryland, and Solomons.
And Dave Allen, NOAA's Arctic
Will
Research
Ambrose,
Program.
I'm at Coastal Carolina University.
Oh, sorry, Will, go ahead.
No, that's okay. He got you. He got me. I'm co-team lead of the Arctic Observing Science subteam.
Kelly Uleg, also from Arctic Research Program in NOAA.
Am I last? I was going to make sure I'm last. So I just want to make sure everyone else has introduced themselves. I think they have. So hi, everybody. I think everyone knows me, Candace Knackman with NOAA Fisheries Office of Policy, and I am a co-lead of the EI collaboration team with Molly and Roberto Delgado, who unfortunately couldn't join the meeting today, but has required NSF training that he couldn't get out of right now. So thank you guys for joining. We just had one more person entering the waiting room. So, hey, Gib, we just finished roll call if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sorry, and I'm eating, so I won't turn my cam on quite yet. But yeah, I'm Gib Hartley. I'm from NESDIS in the Chief of Staff office and our NESDIS Arctic Action Team member. So, yeah.
Thanks for joining, Gib.
Good to see you again.
So we have a pretty small group today. So hopefully that means we'll be able to have a bit of discussion and dialogue. And really the reason for this meeting today is for us to talk about the surveys that folks and cruises that folks have planned for the 2021 season in the Bering Strait, Chukchi, Beaufort Sea region. And this is something that this type of discussion that this group has really been trying to coordinate and lead for a couple of years now. And the impetus for EI collaboration team leading this was a few years ago. There was a really unexpected harmful algal bloom outbreak event close to the start of the field season. And there wasn't time for people to put together specific surveys to address data collection. And so it was a really great opportunity for the research community to come together and talk about, well, who's already planning to be out on the water? Who has the ability to maybe get some extra data samples collection that can be analyzed by folks back in the lab following this season. And from that, we kind of continued these conversations. And then last year, this became a really important conversation again, given the global pandemic being declared about the second week of March, and everybody having to scramble to really figure out who actually is able to go out, and what are the issues with getting surveys out on the water in the middle of a pandemic. And so it was really great last year for us to have this conversation to see if there were ways for people to work together on the minimal number of surveys that were able to go out. And so we wanted to continue that conversation today for the 2021 field season. And so we've invited several folks on the call today to give us some of just the initial information, as we realize many of you are still in the planning and proposal stage with a lot of this work right now, to know who's going out and what types of collaboration efforts might be available. And then following that, we're going to have Drew share with us a couple of graphics of, we sent out a survey a couple of months ago to everyone asking for your input and thoughts on how things have gone with the information that we shared last year. What could we do better? What could we do differently? And so he'll share some of the results of that survey with us, and then we'll have time to discuss that as well. So that's kind of the agenda for today and the reason for this. Molly, before we have the presenters, was there anything you wanted to add?
No, I just want to, I'm just really grateful for everybody's input to this. This has been, to me, just one of the best collaborations that I've seen among the research community in the last couple of years. So I just want to thank everybody for that.
All right, so with that, I think we will ask our different presenters to talk about the plans for their organization for this year. I know some people have slides and others are just gonna talk briefly about a few things. And so Drew, when the time comes, I think some of our presenters might ask you to put the spreadsheet up. And so, Bob, I'd like to invite you to go first and talk about what NOAA Fisheries has planned for 2021.
Great, thanks, Candace. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can, Bob.
Excellent. Okay, great. I'm having horrible bandwidth issues today, so I'm not able to share. We can put up the spreadsheet if you want. Basically, I'm just going to talk in real generalities. I think you're going to go through the spreadsheet later. Unfortunately, with COVID, it's a little more difficult for us this year to say exactly what we're going to be able to do. Having said that, our core surveys are all on the spreadsheet. We will continue to update the spreadsheet as we get information moving forward, but unfortunately, it is a moving target. And let me just give you an example. Not only are we dealing with COVID, but one of the NOAA vessels in the Northwest Pacific is down right now, and we're potentially shuffling our vessels in order to deal with that. So it's a constantly moving target. Let me just talk about our plans. The Oscar Dyson just got done with our survey in the Gulf of Alaska. It went extremely well. Folks were able to shelter in place and do so safely. And this was for pollock in the Central Gulf. So that bodes well for us moving forward in terms of staying on schedule. Our plan is to do everything we would usually do in this year, except those projects that were that we had to cut as associated with the increased shelter in place requirements, and so we lost some of our ship time in that regard. So on the Dyson, we're continuing to plan for our ecosystem surveys later in the year. You see one of them highlighted here. That was actually being moved to a charter. And then there's one later in the year that we are moving forward. Anyway, they're both moving forward. They're both focused on the Bering Sea, Southern Bering Sea, for the most part. Our bottom trawl surveys this year are focused both on, and sorry, Drew, I appreciate your clicking there. If you go up, this starts at the end of April, early May. You can see a number of vessels. There's the Alaska Knight and Vestor Allen there. And there, yep, that's the one. And so we're moving forward with that. That's the one in the Southeast Bering Sea. So we've got 2 vessels that are going to be in the Southeast Bering Sea. We are planning to do our full survey. That's from May to the end of, beginning of May to the end of July with 2 vessels. Usually we do 3 different legs on those vessels. We're shortening that up in order to reduce our footprint and our interaction with local communities, but we are moving forward. This year, we're also focused on the Northern Bering Sea. So this will move forward north of St. Matthew Island, and focus on that region. Same station spacing from the end of July to the beginning of August with 2 vessels. Those are bottom trawl vessels. And again, this is part of what we have done in the most recent years. In addition, this is a Gulf of Alaska year for us. So we have a number of charter vessels scheduled to be in the Gulf of Alaska this year. We're in the Eastern Gulf. Over the same time period, we're in the Bering Sea, so May, June, July, roughly. Those plans are continuing to move forward. And again, the reason we don't have specifics is because we're still working on which communities we can go in and out of. We have shelter in place requirements, moving a large number of staff up out of Seattle. And just let me give you another example of concerns and issues. You know, every hotel room in Dutch Harbor and Kodiak is full for many months to come from commercial fisheries. So we're still working out details on how to deal with our shelter in place plans. So we're just not able to give the specific details at this time. Lastly, towards the end of the year, we are working with our colleagues at OAR, we'll probably hear about later, and others to make sure that we can finish up our Oscar Dyson schedule. Some of that was already moved. And again, we'll hear about this from OAR to a charter. So we're working there, participating in that cruise with staffing as well. So again, apologize for the lack of details here, but we'll continue to move forward. And if anyone does have questions, please feel free to reach out to me and I can give you more specifics on where we think we're going to be, and then get you on a list for updates as they become available. They are changing by the day. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks, Drew, and thanks, Candace.
Say, Bob, this is Molly. Do you have any sail drone work that NIMS is planning this summer?
Yeah, thanks, Molly. Great question. We do not have any survey work on sail drones this summer. We do have a sail drone in Bristol Bay right now that's tracking tagged crab. So that's mowing the lawn up in Bristol Bay. But otherwise, we don't plan to be in the water this year at all.
Okay, any other questions for Bob?
Molly, I just wanted to build on what Bob was saying. I think NOS is the only game in town as far as sail drone missions this summer, and hopefully someone is here to report on that. We're piggybacking on that mission. It's more coastal, but we're piggybacking on that mission to look at ocean acidification.
Oh, okay. So it'd be NOS and OAR. So NOS would be Office of Coast Survey, and then OAR is doing some OA work with it. Is that it?
Correct.
Okay, so
And-
we should make sure we get that included and the sail drone in the, because people look at these as cruises as well, even though they're not, they're uncrewed systems.
Yeah, and Molly, I just sent a GChat to Amy Holman to ask what NOS has planned because I don't see her in the call right now.
I think it's just starting to gel, like many activities. So it's still TBD. I'm just getting pressure from NOS to send the money, send the funding that we promised this week. After checking feverishly every week for the past several months. So it's just coming together.
Okay, and I know, Bob, there's plans underway to put a wave buoy in Bristol Bay, and so. We want to make sure that we work. Here's Amy trying to come in now. We want to make sure we're working on that with you as well, just for the location and just for, what would be most helpful to you all, as well as the fishing industry and others. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. It would be good to talk, Molly, especially with the build out on the Climate Fishery Initiative and the feedback to the ROMs, soon to be MOMS models. That would be great to have that conversation. And if no one else is here on the sail drone, just what we are aware of at NIMS is that the drones will be in Bristol Bay. They'll be on the inner shelf all the way up through the northern Bering Sea. And then I believe there's also a stretch of water out by St. Lawrence that they're covering as well. They reached out to us and we're trying to determine whether or not there's any overlap or any instruments we need to share on those drones as well.
Okay. And it looks like Amy Holman is trying to join, but having difficulty. So hopefully she will be able to join us soon.
Yeah, so we can circle back.
Yeah.
So David, would you please share with us the work that OAR has planned as part of the DBO, the NOAA DBO contribution?
Sure, and I'll just note too that Jackie's on the line and is one of the co-Is on this project. So please, Jackie, feel free to interject. Unfortunately, we're in a similar. Well, first, thanks for letting me speak with you today. We are in a similar position. We're contracting a vessel, and as a result, we don't actually know which vessel at this particular juncture. I think if we were to have this meeting next week, we would probably know a lot more. But at this point, we're at the tail end of the contracting process and awaiting word on what vessel we have. We are planning on going up either out of Seattle or out of Kodiak. And in response to the most recent AEWC meeting, as well as the just the general plan and availability of vessels, it looks like we're going to shoot for early August departure from either Kodiak or Seattle. So right now the target is August 5th, and return to port on September 2nd. Obviously, that's a little bit that's based on the 25-day base that we were contracting for. We have an option to buy additional days, but that all depends on what vessel we actually attain. The plan for the research cruise is to collect to cruise the northern Bering and Chukchi seas, to occupy DBO's lines 1 through 5, the 70-meter isobath in the Bering Sea, the Icy Cape line, and mooring sites. So we'll be recovering and deploying moorings at 2 sites in the Gulf of Alaska, 15 in the Bering, and 24 in the Chukchi. We also plan to have a mammal and seabird observer on the vessel, and then of course we're also going to be collecting zooplankton and samples for OA and harmful algal blooms. And I don't know that we can, and obviously we'll be doing benthic sampling as well. But in addition to that, we're not completely clear on the collections and other activities that will take place on the ship, simply because we, number one, don't have a ship, and number two, we do not know how many berths we actually have. And that was really interesting, Bob's report on the hotel situation. That's going to hopefully not impact us, but that may be a real challenge as well, since we were under similar shelter-in-place requirements and testing requirements. Jackie, I don't know if you wanted to add anything at this particular point. I hate to be so waffly, but it's still just a little bit early days at this juncture.
Yeah, it is. And the only thing I would add, thanks, David, that I think you covered on everything, is that it's a joint between the DBO and the Eco Foci. And so that's why the Bering Sea work and the going all the way up that 70-meter isobath, and then doing the moorings, and then there's boxes that Phyllis has around those. So I think that would be the only thing. So it is a joint cruise on that. It'll, yeah, so that's about the information we have, but it will do all the core from physics to biology for status and change impacts in the Bering and the Chukchi Sea. We will turn around 2 sediment traps, one in the M8 mooring that Phyllis has in south and west of St. Lawrence Island in the DBO1 hotspot. And then up in the northeast Chukchi Sea, we'll turn that as Chukchi ecosystem mooring that Seth Danielson has the lead on, but we have a sediment trap he has that on there. Catherine Lalonde is the lead from Canada on that, and she's the lead in the one on the DBO1. So I would just add those 2. We've had discussions with like the HABs. They'll be doing the full suite from water column into sediments and the macrofauna.
And David, was that in the spreadsheet, was that the one that originally had the fair weather listed?
No, it's actually TBD. It's I think it's row 17 on the spreadsheet with Jackie and Phyllis there.
Yeah, I think that the further down were the updated in that March spreadsheet.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Drew, can you go back to the spreadsheet? Because the last, yeah.
And you're right, Molly. I saw that too, and I thought, oh, something changed. Are we not from last night, because the ship is just still uncertain.
Oh, so we have an updated edition on row 17. Did you say?
Yeah, if you go all the way down on the bottom of that sheet, maybe just delete that row, because if you go all the way, where the sheet I filled out had the March one.
Yeah, I'm not sure we have the updated version here, Drew.
Yeah.
There's some March added, but
this is, yeah, I think I've been updating this version, the March tab, as I've been receiving updates from folks, but yeah, so it is possible that you might be looking at an earlier version.
Or you might have an old plan and then a new one, both listed.
Yeah.
Okay, and the same cruise. Okay, we need to reconcile those.
Yeah, sorry about that. The spreadsheet that I'm looking at has it as a TBD, so it actually didn't raise any eyebrows to me.
Okay.
Right, it was the same with the one I looked at, but we can make sure that I'll send you the updated version I have if you want, Andrew. But
okay.
I filled out, I mean, it was before you said don't fill out anymore. I think I had filled it out with the TBD.
Okay. Yeah, I think just to make sure that we don't overwrite things, we can, if you want to send them to me, and then I'll make the updates as a point person, that's fine. I can, however, completely, share this version if you haven't seen this one before.
Yeah, I would just
I
would just ask, because your dates have it as February 4. Do you have any more because you have go quite down that spreadsheet? Well, you don't. Okay. Interesting, because David, you and I have been looking at another version of this spreadsheet.
Yep.
Yeah. So is this a Google Doc that everyone, or Google Sheets that everyone's filling in?
So it's shared with a bunch of people. I'm generally just asking that people don't edit it, just to prevent overwriting and all of that, and just so we can keep track of who's doing what. That being said, yeah, I can honestly, let me just reshare this. I can.
Okay.
So I'll probably just get hit with a bunch of access requests, but I'm going to put this in the chat.
Yeah, because I got to find because the one I've been working on in Google before you said don't to do it actually was updating. So I got to find that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah, if having people update this live would be easier, that's fine. I just was kind of trying to have a more conservative way of having people access this document at first. But if we feel fine having other folks just have edit access, I can definitely allow that.
So Drew, I see what the issue is. In this spreadsheet, there's a second tab at the bottom that says March.
Yes.
And I think that's probably what some people are looking at, because those have date of entry updates in the month of March.
Yeah. So
if you click to the other tab right now at the bottom.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Okay, yes. So sorry if I didn't mention that. This is how we've been organizing them, I think, in the past, is we create a new tab for every month that we go back in and create edits. Instead of writing over and overwriting a previous month's work, we just have a new tab so we can look back and see what the progress has been.
So yeah, so I think for the remainder of this meeting, we should show the March tab because that has the most recent information on it.
I've been screen sharing the March tab, but just so everyone knows.
Oh.
It seems like there's still.
And ultimately, it's your workflow, so we will go with your guidance, since I know you're still posting these on the IARPA collaborations page as well. So you need at some point a final version that no one else is going to touch. So your call on process.
Yeah. Now that we know that it's maybe the tab issue, let's just try to keep it such that if you want to make edits, email it to me. And if that becomes burdensome, we can address that in the future. But for now, I think we should keep it this way.
Sounds reasonable to me. And I don't know if folks had any questions on the line. I know we're probably long overdue to have a conversation with Bob, and also Jackie and I and Phyllis and I have not been meeting regularly yet because we didn't have a ship. So just if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Jackie, Phyllis, and I, and we'll be happy to field any questions you have. We're still early days for additional partner programs and birth requests, et cetera.
So I know one of the issues that we had with eco-foci moorings M2 and M8. So AUS had committed to building them out similar to the Chukchi Ecosystem Observatory and the Gulf of Alaska Ecosystem Observatory, and adding additional sensors. And we still have some funding available to do that. So we really need to get together and see what the plans are, the ultimate plans are for those build outs, and what the needs are, and what the potential plans and opportunities, so we can put those into the cruises if there's going to be additional instruments added.
Jackie, go for it.
Oh no, Bob was first, and then you.
Oh, whoops.
Bob.
Yeah, okay. No, that's great. Good to hear, Molly. I just wanted to throw a couple things out there. One, David, thanks. We should get together. I just got an email from one of my folks about the need to be in Umnak Pass, turning around on one of our moorings. Apparently it's going to get bumped off the Spring Dyson Cruise. I just got this 10 minutes ago. But the bigger thing that you were just mentioning, Molly, the Dyson has some winter maintenance coming up this winter that's going to change our schedule. There is also a long-term effort to start thinking about the midlife maintenance schedule on the Dyson that is going to send us all into a tizzy in the next 10 years. I don't think it's going to happen until probably 2025, 2026, but we need to start talking now about what those missions need to be. So what we're doing at AFSC is putting a 10-year plan together as to what we think our needs are going to be on the Dyson, with a complete guesstimate as to how many sea days we're going to get, we'll reach out to OAR. We'll make sure you're on that list as well, because it would be great to fold that planning into this process so that we make sure it gets done before we lose vessels.
Yep.
That's a great point.
All right, well, thanks. So I think this is a good time, Jackie, to move on for you and have you share all of the other DBO work that's proposed. Did you have slides that you were going to share? Okay, so Drew, if you want
to de-share the
Yep.
Google, if Andrew would do that. And I did it on the international because that's what I was asked, because everybody else could do the national.
Yeah.
So I'm ready
Yep.
as soon as.
Yep, so Drew will stop sharing in just a second and you should be able to share your screen, Jackie.
All right.
Okay.
So you shall be able to see that now.
Yeah, if you just put it into slideshow mode. Yep, perfect.
Okay, so what I was asked to do was on the cruises that I know for the international part. That includes the DBO, but there are also a few others that are working in the Pacific Arctic region. I think you all know what the Pacific Arctic Group is, but I would just put this because we've had our, it's a, a network of institutes and individuals where we try to coordinate the cruises and cross-platform, and actually are building some early career and indigenous opportunities in a recent pending support with IASC for doing that on multiple ships. I would just say that we have our annual spring reading Arctic Science Summit Week. So we just had that. That's the lower right virtual call. And the upper right was the last meeting I went to in China. That was in the fall of 2019 in person. We've had them in ASSW. So we have these meetings twice a year. In the spring, it's to talk about upcoming field plans, which is why I can update you all. And then in the fall, we kind of present results. And if all goes well, we'll be in Victoria, British Columbia in the fall, but most may well be in virtually. So you know the vessels that we have. I just put this here because in 2019, we had all these different countries doing cruises out there. COVID obviously came along, and it was Japan and Korea that primarily had their full operations, but they left from their ports. And the Zhulong was also out there. It was a little bit more difficult to get the information from them, but you can get an idea what they did in 2019 here. So the Zhulong is going out again this year. The Iran has their program, the Mirai, and I'm going to present to you updates on that, working in the Pacific Arctic area. The Louis St. Laurent for the work they do up in the Canada Basin. The Sir Wilfrid Laurier, we do a joint program for the DBO, let alone the work they do in their own country as they go up to the Canadian archipelago. We had the Oscar Dyson work that we did with the DBO and EcoFoci last year. The Sikuliaq was used for a lot of, as NSF work, but it also provided an opportunity for other activities from other agencies. Healy, we've worked with that on the DBO, NCIS, OAR, as well as EcoFoci in the past. And then the Norseman crew that Rebecca takes out in the Bering Strait moorings every summer, but we were able to use it last October for a cruise. And as I said, the Sir Wilfrid Laurier is a joint US-Canada one. So we build this cruise. So I built this out from the, updated it. Normally it's nearly double this size, but we're starting to ramp back up after COVID. So the first cruise, we have the Laurier. I'll show you that. Norseman, NSF would probably mention that. The Iran, we are still waiting on the DBO EcoFoci one. We have Jamstack going out. I'll give you a view of the Nabos cruise going out in the East Siberian Sea and Laptev, and then Louis St. Laurent, as I mentioned. So this is available. We put this in the PAG. We try to update it by the fall of what actually happened. Put in the contacts as well as the chief scientist. So my plan is to maintain this, but the as we're doing, but the US ones and this information internationally into your spreadsheet. So I'll be can add that on an annual or twice a year basis. So the first one, right now, we're still in the pending mode for this with the COVID issue. They want us to load in Victoria. The plan, if that was able to occur, last year it was crew only, so there was no science done on it. But on an annual basis, we're going out there doing the standard DBO measurements, as David was mentioning, that we do on the NOAA program. We also, but the Canadians take care of the physical oceanography and the zooplankton work, primary production. We handle the nutrients and chlorophyll. We have optical measurements, satellite calibrations for NASA through CRAN-FRI. We're looking at taxonomy. This is all part of the DBO program, from the water column to the benthos, so any of the planktons, and then macro benthos, and then marine mammal and seabird surveys. So this is something that is actually, it's pending right now. It's going to require a 2-week quarantine in Victoria, but that could change. We may get ideas to get off in Diavik, and that is something we've had discussions with NSF and have a tentative plan with that, and then working with the Canadians if this cruise goes. We then have the COPRI, which is the Korean Ocean Polar Research Institute. So they will leave from Korea like they did last year. So now these countries are putting in these long transit times. So they will leave about July 1 and return back to Korea 3 months later. And they have this leg 1, which is coming up through the Aleutians in here. And that's, I'm not going to show a grid on that one because we didn't discuss that because we deal with the northern part of the Bering and the Chukchi. But I'll talk about the leg 2 and 3. So they are on, they have 3 legs. These are the chief scientists on the different legs. So leg 1, 2, and 3 coming out of COPRI. They're leaving, they originally were going to leave from Incheon, but they're coming out of Gyeongsang, Korea, and they will go back, working primarily in the Bering Strait, Chukchi, and the East Siberian Sea. Their main focus is up in the Paseo observing area, which is up in the Chukchi borderland regions. They have a lot of, they're looking at the environmental parameters, transition, as you might well know, for the sea ice decrease, and they're also doing a geological work. They do have ice camps if they come into the ice, and they look at satellite-based observations for that. They are putting on, they do CTD work, interesting, and plankton, but they have acoustic EK60 on the vessel, so it allows them to do comparisons of where fish might be with their the net tows that they do. What's interesting is that the leg 3, they have a geology program. So they're going to be looking at methane on the outer part of the East Siberian Sea shelf here. They're mapping, looking at methane release, looking at biomarkers of methane, microbial studies. And it's interesting to see these nodules in this picture because we find them in Barrow Canyon during the Shelf Basin Interactions Program back in the 2000s. They're on the slope about 250 to 500 meters. So they have a lot of biogenic mineral concentrations, you know, basically manganese nodule. I'm just thinking of that because I was on another meeting this morning. We were talking about mining in the Arctic, subsea mining. So you can see some of the, the type of data that they're coming sub-bottom profile activities on that. So if you move on to Japan, so this is with the Mirai. They will be coming from Japan, and then they are going to stop in Dutch Harbor on the outbound here. They go up and do the DBO2 and DBO3 on their transit parts, and then they're going to up in the DBO5. They have agreement. They had a nice presentation, the Alaska Whaling Commission. They will be out of there by September 15th, and the local community had no issue with their activities there. They are going to focus up in the borderland region, which is probably the primary area, any potential fisheries, because the maximum depth is 2,000 meters for commercial fisheries. So there's interest in doing these type of measurements up there, and as well as just pure environmental science activities. They do put out sediment traps that usually they're seasonal ones, and they are bringing them back. But actually, for the Japanese, they tend to put these long-term moorings over for the year. They will come back then and do Bering Strait. This is when they'll do the DBO2 and 1. So they're adjusted their timing to going up and doing some of the DBOs, and then on the return coming back, and then they will go back to Hachinohe, Japan by October. So you can see the length that is occurring because of these the COVID policies. They have their own I know for this particular cruise last year, they actually had quarantine land. They moved them offshore, quarantined them on the ship, got them tested, came back on shore and did the whatever, just to do the final offload of whatever. And then they headed north. So they did their quarantine in offshore areas. So they're going to be looking, just as just a summary, looking at physical oceanography, atmospheric, oceanic, and biogeochemistry, ocean acidification, the ecosystem, environmental pollution, and then they're working on novel research technology that JAMSTEC is very good about doing. And you can see that they have moorings, and particularly the 3 of them in Barrow Canyon there, but they're also looking at trace gases and aerosols and physical oceanography, wave dynamics, and AUVs. So they're building that capacity and have that capacity, and will be using parts of that during their planned operations this year. The Canadians, this is the Bofajaya observing system. So this is a collaboration also with Japan is involved in this, but this is the lead that they have. So it's Canada, Japan, and the US on the Louis S. St. Laurent. Billy Williams is the chief scientist. So TNS, they're looking at traces of sea ice melt and velocity, and you probably all realize that the fresh water's been building up there, so the stratification is stronger. The nutricline is lower in the water column, and that's influencing productivity there. They'll look at zooplankton and phytoplankton microbes. They're still looking at signs of Fukushima. Working with, last year they had a connection with folks in Utiavik. So the year before they were not allowed to come in, but last year at the same time they were able to connections to come in and do these 2 shelf basin exchange lines, which is great for looking at those connectivities on that. So that's that. The Nansen and Amundsen observing system, the NABOS activities. So Igor Polyakov provided this slide here. They'll be using the academic Trishnikov. They will be starting in Kirkenes and returning there in Norway. But the interesting part of that, even though we would say this is the Atlantic sector here, they're coming to do, obviously work in the slope area. They're staying out of the Russian EEZ. They will do CTD transects and particularly close collaboration on this portion of it here with COPRI. So they have a collaborative program. They're going to jointly work on 3 of these moorings that they're going to in place along this outflow area here. And they were also opening it up to, JAMSTEC will also have some participants on that cruise. So these moorings provide some nice information. And I have been talking to Igor and with COPRI about making this a modified DBO-like line. So they put some biology and COPRI will do biology and chemistry on that line. So they've already got that starting to build out. And if that continues, that would be really informative for the region. And that's the summary of the international ones that I know, multiple websites, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Does anyone have any questions for the information Jackie just shared?
Hey, Candace, I've got a quick question for Jackie. Yeah, thanks. Sorry. Jackie, you mentioned at the onset Indigenous communities engagement. Are any of these trips planning on having a local person come out onto the vessels? Reason I ask is in collaboration with you and OAR, we're also talking about the potential to participate in that, provide some fundings to help with that, et cetera, from the NIMS side.
Yeah, the only thing I know that COPRI has, they usually they would bring on a polar bear watch, and JAMSTEC would do too. The problem with it is this COVID, whether or not the native person would like to be spending the quarantine time in Korea and Japan for that. I don't know if we could put something on in Dutch for that one. As far as the plans for our August cruise, that we haven't had, the participant list now is being cut down nearly by half that we're hoping to have. So right now there's not a plan to put a local community observer on that, but we will do as the Dyson did and others last year, keeping in the connection to that. But that will be part of the discussion as we build out the program now.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If I
David.
may. Sorry, I had a couple of questions for you actually, and yeah, it's unfortunate that we're, I feel like once we get to more normal times, we might actually have a better opportunity for some of these activities. But I wanted to ask first whether you're updating the cruise table, the international cruise table for DBO on the UMC's DBO site. And number two is, do you have some kind of data sharing agreement with the other international partners to actually share all the data from these cruises, and how is that relationship working? I know you have a portal on the Arctic Data Portal, but just curious just to hear some thoughts on that.
Sure. And actually, I brought this up during Arctic Science Summit Week for the data one. I'll go back first on the table. We usually are putting that on the PAG site, but you're right, with the new DBO data portal we have more control of it here at the UMCs. Yep. We will have that on that site, and so that's a good point, because I haven't put it on that site yet, but they're running on should be running on the PAG sites. But I think that so that answers that one. As far as the and by the way, all the talks from the Pacific Arctic Group meeting that we had are going to be available, but you have to register for the Arctic Science Summit Week. But we will try. Usually we can put the ones that I'm related to, we'll put them open access on our new web portal. As far as data, I asked everybody in the internationals to put a data slide. We only had a 3-hour meeting, so we're going to have more extensive in the fall. And Kopri and Japan both have data portals. They have different date lines, data on it, date, closure before it's open. And one of the activities that we're trying to get is to have more connecting, like a meta. We have this parameter file, but it doesn't seem to be doing all the connections for. It's too detailed to say, which station, which time, where were you getting it, to try to get something so people know the point of contact and who to get access to. For example, the web link, we have web links to the DBO site that at Korea. Jamstex has a 2-year closure on theirs, but on an individual basis. If you're part of the observing system, you can work on an individual PI to PI. Still working on, we have loaded data sets on the NSF Arctic Data Portal. And there's actually a data page there. So that actually is the one, if we could just link a meta file to everybody else's where they're locating just the DBO is where I'm going after, including the NCEI, where NOAA data sets are going as we're part of this. So, anything that is coming out of Action My Lab, I link it into the DBO data portal that we have, and then link it with the other one. So that's the biggest thing. We have a distributed observing system. Everybody has different time locks on it. Even the, AMBON, which is, and AOS has the data sets on that, but even those are project closed until the data sets are final. So at some point in an observing mode, I think we have to have, who can you contact to actually get some of that data before it even, quote, is clean to be used for open access. I think that's still something we need to work on as a community beyond just the DBO on any one of these observing things. But that's how we have it. And it is an issue that's risen to the top. We have a data policy, and some countries are better than others, including Canada. And in the sense that Canada, we get their data on the DBO because they share it, and we put it on all the bottle files, all the information we had, and it gets released under the auspices of the Arctic Data Center. To access Canadian data directly is an issue too that they're dealing with. Right. So that's what I would say. China, it's very difficult. Russia, very difficult. On a one-to-one PI, I've got data. But on a national archive, though, particularly China lately, and it's, China and Russia lately.
Well, hopefully, I mean, it seems to me that getting the data out is sort of one of the keys to unlocking the real potential for DBO. But obviously, there's a lot of geopolitics and other agency practices and beyond that need to be navigated before we can really get there.
Right, and I would just add that we have a 22 paper, we have a PLOS special issue that you help support some of the open access. I mentioned that because the requirement in a PLOS for open access is that you list where your data sets are. So this has been a really boon for everybody who's putting in one of those papers to be able to say where it's accessing. There is an issue though, as we move into synthesis, and if NSF was on here, I'd ask this question because, I mean, any agency, you know, where do those data sets, synthesis data sets go? How do you link them to the core data sets? We have a data, for example, we have a paper out with international, one of 25 authors. That lead author is the name everybody's, but all the core is embedded in it. So you got to have those DOI numbers. That's the only I would say, you know, get those DOI numbers on your, and then they have to be cited in publications.
Yep.
Okay,
thank you.
Any other clarifying questions or anything for Jackie?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in, Candace, if I could, and say, Jackie, sure. I'm happy to talk offline too, since, you know, taking on new and being new at NESDIS, I'm happy to facilitate what I can at NCEI. So again, you might just have to give me some background to help you out, but I'd love to connect the dots as best I can to help there.
That would be excellent, because one of the things too with NASA is they're asking, they have been doing data products for us. So they have a DBO data portal and asking, are people using it? So I'm putting a survey out there. And part of this survey is where are you putting your data? To every person that's on my 400 list DBO part, you know, those who are actively, particularly, which is smaller than that. But I think this would be great, particularly, you know, with the NOAA related data sets, you know, the BOEM, because I've been on project where it's sent to you, and we need to be able to connect NCEI with Arctic Data Center with, you know, with where other ones go. So yes, great, thanks, nice introduction.
I'll reach out over email then. Thank you.
Oh, perfect.
So unfortunately, we don't have anybody on the call today who can talk about the Sikuliaq surveys that are going out. But the spreadsheet that Drew had up before showed about a handful of Sikuliaq surveys that are planned, a few by Bernie Coakley and Craig Lee, continuing the work that he's been doing for several years, funded by ONR. And I think there might be one or two others on there. Jackie, right. Are you able to share anything about any of those?
Sure, I can. I pulled out the US ones because that wasn't what but the July on the Norseman 2 should go forward with Rebecca Woodgate to turn those moorings around 3, but she has to pull the 3 from last year and put in 3 from this. So she's got 6 moorings to actually turn around that, but that's supposed to be in July. And then I know that Craig gave a talk, as did Bernie at the AWC meeting. You were there, I think, on it too. And I think that's in October for Bernie's one is into September through October, I think. And that's going to be doing the G&G type work with the passive active acoustics on there. I should just say one thing if we have the time, is that I was approached after I gave a talk for the FARO, which is Facilitators of Arctic Research Operators. Where there was a workshop as part of ASSW, and I gave an overview of the PAG. They approached me about one of their RISE program that was supposed to go on Bernie's ship. I don't know more about it. There's some issues going on with that, maybe not with the cruise, it's going to happen. But anyway, so I contacted the internationals. They were very nice, but it's too late in the cruise to try to put anybody on this year. And the problem is they want 7 people, 7 days, and no cost. So but there is an interest that the RISE folks are gonna, because they use the Sikuliaq, right? So these people got awarded a grant to work on the Sikuliaq with Bernie. So there's something hopefully will work out there. They can do that deep coring. And then the only thing was Craig mentioned what he was doing on up in the high Arctic area.
Great, thank you.
We've raised our hand.
Yeah, I can jump in because I'm involved.
Oh, hi, Laura.
Lauren, we're having trouble here. We're having trouble hearing you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, maybe turn off your camera. I'm not sure if it's a bandwidth issue.
Try that.
Perfect. You sound much better.
Okay, awesome. So I am involved as an ancillary PI on a Sikuliaq cruise that's leaving mid-May from Dutch Harbor and is going to the marginalized zone. The PI on that is Rob Mason out of Yukon, and doing some underway sampling So it's a heavily chemistry focused cruise, looking at mercury cycling in the near ice, the marginal ice zone and under ice, and also some natural radon measurements. So kind of following up on some geotraces cruise observations.
That's great. Thank you, Lauren, for sharing that. And just really quickly before we move to the next part of the agenda, I saw Amy Holman jumped on. And so Amy, sorry to put you on the spot, but I didn't know if you had just a couple of minutes maybe of preliminary information of any of the hydrographic work that National Ocean Service is planning for this year.
Hey, Candace. Hi, everybody. Let me see if I can share a screen. I'm going to pull this up. So, and Candace, while you're at it, maybe if you could copy over, I think we have most of these, but Coast Survey finally put out their story map for their work on the Fairweather Rainier and contracts. So that is the latest and greatest on all of that. And then our nav managers sent me and Bob some information on a cruise they're evidently just planning with Sail Drone. I understand you guys had some questions about that. And so I am planning to bring up that graphic. So stand by here for a second. Let me get this, share screen.
And I just shared the story link, Amy, in the chat for everyone.
Great. I'm going to try showing you guys it this way. Okay. I'm zooming in. Can people make that out at all?
Yes, looks good.
Okay. I'll share some additional information, but this is what they're talking about. And they were nice enough to reach out to Bob to say, hey, we're thinking about doing this. You want to plan? But that's a little nice of you, Bob, to even consider on such a short turnaround. So we'll see how this goes. The timing is a little bit earlier than last year. Last year they were going in September, and as you all recall, the whales came in early, so they got their first practice with getting an all-stop email and figuring out how to move forward. Luckily, they've worked with us enough to take that seriously, and we're able to complete their project, and things are good. So Bob, I don't know if you remember offhand, I'm trying to juggle screens here, what the order was going to be on this. Usually we try to go south to north, but I'm not sure about the Bristol Bay piece. This is still in development, Candace, so I can send whoever is most interested, pass along this information, and we can kind of go from there. You're seeing this screen, so if I go back here, Sail Drone lessons learned. Let me get some stuff out of the way. You guys don't need to see. So really all I have is that plus their start of the comms plan for this year. And actually this is part of last year's, and this is the one from last year, and they sent me a link to work on the one for this year. So still very much in progress, Candace. I think that's the best I can say, and happy to share that little schematic. And as it comes into being more solidified, it will show up on the story map. So that is a link everyone can keep checking.
Thanks, Amy. Molly, did you have a question?
Well, I just think that it's important to put this into our cruise report and status report as well, because then, I mean, it's just things out in the water that we're doing. I also think we should include any glider work. I know our whale glider is going to be flying the Chukchi again this summer. In the past, it's been over 100 days a year. Last year, managed to get it out for like 35 days, but we're hoping to get it back to the 100 days again this year. And then hopefully starting next year, we'll have our Bering Sea glider work too. But so any of those things, I think ships, gliders, sail drones, any of these, any kind of drone work, I think it's good to get this in here because again, these are opportunities for collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Amy, for sharing that, and we'll be sure to keep checking the story map as information gets solidified. So just looking at the time, I would like to give Drew just a couple of minutes to share the results of the survey that we sent around to folks a month or so ago, asking for feedback on how we share this information. And so, Drew, if you want to share that information with us, please.
Of course. Yeah. So as Candace said, we sent a survey around about last year's COVID-19 mitigation strategies that were used on surveys, as well as kind of asking respondees what they might envision for 2021, what they might envision rolling over, what worked well, what didn't work. So the raw results of this are, I believe, attached to the agenda on the IARPIC webpage. So if you want to look at the actual raw responses there, you're welcome to. Here I've just begun to put together some of what the data looks like just so we can kind of discuss them today. So I'm not going to read all of these out, but we had 8 survey questions. And basically, we were just trying to understand what mitigation strategies did you use? How did you coordinate and communicate these? Looking forward to 2021, will you roll any of these over? So basically, did they work? What would you change? And finally is, how did you communicate this strategy to coastal communities? So we got 6 responses, which encompassed 7 distinct surveys, 2 of which were international. And so of those, you can see on the left, I've broken those down by vessel, and on the right, just showing the international US breakdown. So interestingly, we had only one response indicated that a survey was canceled. That was an international. Now, of course, I'm aware that this isn't a reflection of what the reality was. I believe there's quite a few other canceled surveys, but this is what we have responses for. So kind of throughout, these are a snapshot of what responses might actually exist out there. So one of the first questions was, what mitigation strategies did you employ and were they successful? And again, I would just note here that just because one of these categories doesn't have a lot of responses does not mean that a strategy wasn't used. It just wasn't necessarily mentioned by the responder. So testing and shelter in place, quarantining were by far the most important strategies used, as well as following that social distancing on the ship itself, shortened cruise schedule, increased sanitation stations, and then there was 1 cancellation. And I think, interestingly, of those 6 responses, 7 surveys, there's only 1 positive case of COVID. It was a positive antibody test. So I'm actually not sure if that was an actual COVID positive case, but of those respondees, only one person on one of these surveys had a positive antibody test. So some of the identified good practices that respondees wanted to roll over into 2021. Well, first, all of these mitigation practices, all 7 mitigation practices will roll over. This is obviously, even with the vaccine, this is still a lot of unknowns about this year. And that really a lot of the respondents said that the leadership of the chief scientist or cruise survey organizer in planning, discussing, disseminating information about the COVID plans is crucial. So making sure that there's a centralized point person for this and that information is getting across consistently is important. Multiple COVID tests before departure will be ideal. I think one or two responses indicated that this might be a replacement for long quarantine times before a survey, and also that the role of vaccination in changing these COVID mitigation plans are unknown. Now, all these responses occurred in early March. It's a slightly different landscape now. I'm sure that we are beginning to start thinking about what does vaccination mean, which strategies we're going to use going forward, and very likely for at least US surveys, the discussion around vaccination is probably going to play a huge role in deciding what mitigation practices are used. Some improvements that were noted. First is that there's inconsistencies in guidelines between agencies, organizations. So I think differences between OMAO and NOAA and UNOLS, I think those are three mentioned that have different guidelines that make it kind of difficult for surveys to jump through these hoops to basically kind of meet the prerequisites for going out. And finally, that there wasn't always clear communication to survey participants about how extra costs incurred from quarantine or testing would be covered. So if someone was quarantining or testing before a survey and they were tested positive, would they have to pay out of pocket for extra days at a hotel or something like that? So again, making sure that there's consistent guidelines for these kinds of contingencies. And the last question was regarding coastal communities communication. So almost every survey response said that there was communication with the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission at least once, if not multiple times, and that communication between the PIs on board and the communities, a lot of responses indicated that there was daily communication back and forth while underway. Beyond communicating with the AEWC, before the survey, there was kind of some varied responses. So anywhere between blasting an email list to, again, direct emails to communities before the survey were recorded. And for the one DFO survey, indicated that there was, permits and licenses obtained from the Aurora Research Institute in the Northwest Territories Scientific research license. So those are the survey results as we have them. Now, I think in the little remaining time we have, I think it would be great if we could hear any responses or thoughts from these initial results, or if there's anything that people who were not able to respond to the survey, if there's anything that they would like to add that they that is applicable. So I will stop sharing and open up the floor.
I guess one of the questions that I would have to this group is whether this is worthwhile. One of the questions that we also asked, and I'm not sure, Drew, if we got much response to it, was whether the increased collaboration was useful and how we could, not just COVID, but whether the increased collaboration was useful and whether that could be enhanced in any way, whether we could, how could that be work better? Were there some lessons learned on that? I know some people ended up, especially last year, having crew members do some of their work, their deployments and retrievals, their turnarounds. Some of them, I mean, the year before, we actually were able to put additional crew and researchers on different cruises. It was a lot, we could do a lot more collaboration that way. And so part of this was also looking at some of the lessons learned from the last 2 years, 2 very different years. And as we go forward into the future, how could we do a better job of that kind of collaboration? And not just the COVID response, but also just the actual science collaboration.
I'll just say that I don't recall anyone noting anything about the status of collaborations. I have the Excel sheet up now, so I can go ahead and see if anyone did say something.
So any thoughts from anybody on the call today? Yeah, Bob.
Molly, I'll jump in on that. You know, unfortunately, the COVID piece has been so incredibly complex. And while, you know, certainly agencies have provided some guidance, most of it has been left to the regions. And as a result, a huge amount of complexity, you know, as you know, for our organization, I'm split between 2 states as well. Other areas down in lower 48 have that worse. And so it's been fairly inconsistent. And so I think that's made responses relative to COVID difficult. I know that's not your question, but on the science end, I think this is hugely important, and I really see that the benefit of this after COVID is going to be great, as we're trying to define how to collect data more effectively, more efficiently, as budgets are decreasing, but our need to increase science capacity, given climate change increases. You know, we've got to share like this. So, you know, I hope that the effort continues, and just acknowledge that this year's probably going to continue to be difficult.
Yeah, I agree, Bob. And already we're getting requests to do something similar for the Gulf of Alaska, you know, in terms of a cruise report and collaboration there. So yeah, I think it's just going to increase, which begs the question, and I think there will be more discussion on this, because at this point, the EI collaboration team is slated to disband at the end of this year. We're not part of the planning on going forward. So there is a question about this whole effort and how it continues on, who owns it, who will be responsible for it, and how it works. So there's the cruise report, and we did put out a separate survey earlier to folks who currently receive the cruise report, asking them if there should be other places where it should be located and circulated, and if there were requests for improvements to it. And the big request that we got was to visualize the cruise tracks, and to have some kind of maps included, which there are lots of different issues with that, with federal vessels, et cetera. But there was that issue. So there is this issue of the distribution of that. And then the issue that keeps coming up too, and this was mentioned by a number of you all, that these were plans that were presented to the AEWC, the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission. And I know there have been discussion about that, because those meetings don't include all of the co-management groups. They're not necessarily comprehensive, but they have become the go-to place. And in return, I know that AEWC is now requesting, putting in an appropriations request to have their meetings paid for by using federal money to pay for their meeting, because now it's become the federal science meeting to communities and co-management groups. So I think there's a number of issues that are arising from this kind of collaboration effort, in terms of coordinating and making sure, seeing what the update of the cruise, trying to collaborate on the science, trying to communicate where these vessels are going to be to communities and those interested in that, and then extending it more statewide. So a number of issues here, and how is this going to go forward in the future? So I'm just going to throw all of those issues out on the table and let anyone who wants to respond to them speak. And it looks like David wants to.
Well, I think, so first off, I wanted to thank Drew for the actual report. I thought that it's actually amazing the number of insights that were actually available there. And I think we have a couple of different opportunities in this the implementation planning process that's going to kick off sometime fairly soon for the new IARPIC plan, as well as the end of plan insights report. And I hope that successes like this sharing of practices, such as such as the vessel planning would be absolutely critical to one, share as a real success, and to provide to the implementation planning process to make sure that it actually finds an appropriate home in the new implementation of IARPIC. However that's configured. I recognize that it's still TBD at this point, like many other things we've discussed today. But I think it's absolutely, as Bob said, I think it's really important that we don't lose this thread of pre-planning, because for instance, a sail drone mission, the leases are really expensive, so a lot of people don't have the opportunity to think about it. But throwing a few instruments on it is a much more reasonable prospect. And with the larger fleet of sail drones, the opportunity for more instruments is certainly greater. And the list also goes on for piggybacking, especially as we get out of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think the opportunities that we can identify in these small group settings where folks know each other and trust each other and can present their plans, I think that's absolutely critical for finding the way forward and finding those sweet spots where folks may have a small amount of money to contribute, whether it's a ship day or whether they have a particular device that may be a very short time out of the way, or right on an existing cruise track. We should be finding those opportunities and taking advantage of them. That's really how the whole enterprise works, since we've all been dealing with really substantial budgetary constraints that I can't imagine are going to go away in the future.
Molly, I have a comment.
Oh, Paul, you have your hand raised. Thanks, David.
I do. I'm largely an interloper in this discussion, but I've been listening to the presentations, and I wanted to comment in view of your observation that the environmental intelligence component is set to disband. It occurs to me in listening to the presentations that you're talking about national assets that are being applied in the Arctic Ocean. And the assets themselves serve as the platforms for collecting diverse data, which are being incorporated into the various discussions. But at the stage of the assets themselves, where these are expensive assets, decisions have to be made by parliaments and congresses and so on, there is an opportunity to interact directly with high-level decision makers at the stage of questions. And one of the disconnects that exists with the scientific community is we do the research and then expect to hand off the results to the decision makers. A much more efficient strategy in terms of building common interests among allies and adversaries alike is to engage them at the stage of questions. And it seems to me that this group, in terms of the contributions of PAG, for example, have already rich representation of many countries involved. And I think you can do more than have a discussion that involves largely the scientific community. I think at the stage in some of these discussions, there is opportunity to think in a transdisciplinary way where the questions become the guiding path between the decision makers, the research community, and the people that are involved with the action, the decisions. So just as an observation in terms of the value of environmental intelligence, that it seems constructive and important, and steps are being made that potentially could be very important. And I would think, just as an outsider, as I mentioned, as an interloper, that this activity is important to continue. So just building on your observation, it's set to disband.
Well, and maybe I should correct myself. It's tentatively set to disband unless there is a reason to exist.
I was trying to provide a reason in terms of your continued existence.
So I should, at this point, we're tentatively set to disband, but unless through the plan and the implementation plan, there is a need for a team, and maybe it's renamed, but maybe there is some kind of a need. But Candace, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah. I was just going to say that IARPIC is not forcing us to disband. Molly, Roberto, and I are just, trying to figure out how we fit into this new plan that will take effect in January. So Paul, thank you for your feedback, for giving us some purpose and positive feedback.
I think it's important. I really do.
Yeah, I would just say that one of the big themes is observing and monitoring, right, in IARPIC. I mean, now it's risen up to a higher level. This fits within that. You can't have observing and look at status and change without having, in the marine environment, without having assets out there of whatever form. So in one sense, that it actually has moved environmental intelligence higher in IARPIC if it's sold that way, you know, and I think it is an important thing because this actually provides the connection to international parts, you know, and I mean, I think we've been in DBO has been highlighted because of the international connections and the forum. So I think it actually needs to be turned around and said, we're not disbanding on it. We have more critical component to this larger of those themes. That's what I would say.
Thanks, Jackie.
Oh, and one last thing I would say is that as we build the it's great that the crew helped and we had medical on the Dyson, you know, but it's above and beyond. And I think in the emergency, but there should not be an assumption, okay, now we're going to start putting more and more. Cause I know I work out there 24/7 out there and you barely get any sleep doing the science you're supposed to do. And you want to help as many people, but at some point there's a capacity issue of the person. It's called life and sleep. So I think that needs to be brought in. And I don't think we can assume we can get the crews to help us every year once we're out of COVID. It's great that they did, but I wouldn't say the unions would like it if we continued that.
Yeah, that was definitely a one-time deal. Hopefully a one-time deal. Hopefully we don't have more of these. Any other thoughts on this? The other topic that I wanted to bring up with you too is that the EI collaboration team, we do have scheduled a postseason review for our meeting in November. I don't think we have a date certain yet, but we're looking in November to do that. And the question to you all is, would there be value in having a mid-season kind of a check-in, like late August, early September, something like that? So would that be of value?
I'm just going to say, I think you all have to decide that because I'm going to be at sea.
We're going to have you call in, Jackie. Yeah.
We'll send you one of the Amazon drones to communicate with us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any thoughts on that? Any reactions? I mean, we'll probably ask people, you know, we'll ping them later with some kind of a questionnaire, but just any initial thoughts on that? David?
I guess it sounds somewhat appealing to me, but as Jackie notes, many people already be at sea, and so many of the opportunities for, you know, potentially, finding similar projects that might be able to add on activities, et cetera. It seems unlikely that it would be possible to necessarily find those activities that would be compatible in a timely fashion. So I'm not 100% sure what we would be accomplishing other than sharing final or in process sort of cruise activities. So that's my only challenge with it. But I mean, I'm all for sharing information throughout the year.
Maybe I was wondering, and Candace, maybe we keep this as a tentative. It might be if there's something really unusual happening in the Bering or the Chukchi or the Beaufort this year that we want to highlight, maybe get some initial observations and share them with the larger community. Maybe something along those lines. If that does happen, I mean, we can kind of keep our eye on what people are seeing, and if there's something really unusual, bring that to people's attention. Is that more something along those lines? Okay, I'm seeing. Yeah,
that makes
Bob.
sense.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, Molly, I'm going to tie my answer into this and the last discussion. You know, I think we're all busy. We all find ourselves with too many meetings, and staff are having a hard time keeping up with this, especially during the field season, as everyone has said. But I agree that the sharing of information is critical. So anything we can do, and I'm kind of jotting down some notes here, to make these engagements more effective. You mentioned the AEWC meeting. We had Arctic Waterways in the past. There's this, each of our lines passes out information publicly on results of surveys, or in some cases, current activities. So maybe thinking about how we can bring all these efforts together in some way. And I mean to share out at the end of the year, to provide information on what our expectations are for the next year, as well as a not a warehouse, but a clearinghouse, or a way to share a web or an email or a website. So for instance, when the Alaska Fisheries Science Center puts out a blog on a current survey on what we're seeing, that it hits the right person, so then it goes out to IARPC. And I know I'm a little disjointed in this, but I think we need to find ways to collate all of our efforts. One way of doing that was our successful push to get the principals to agree to an Indigenous community coordinator for IARPC, and that was successful. That's moving forward. And part of that goal was to have somebody kind of be that person that helps herd the cats, that helps put a meeting together annually, potentially, for sharing this kind of information. I don't know that that's a place for this, but maybe an example of what I think we need to do more broadly. Because in principle, I completely agree with you. Want to share the information, but we find ourselves spread pretty thin doing this to multiple entities very successfully. Sorry for the long-winded response.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Bob. And I know that was one of the original intents of the Bering Science Report, was to do that kind of pre-season, during the season, post-season. The process that is being used to develop those reports is incredibly cumbersome, and it's not very, so information is not very timely. And in fact, I think we're going to have, after having done 3, the third one's at the printer now, and should be out next week. After having 3 of those, a year's worth, we're actually going to look at those and want to talk with everybody about their usefulness, the timeliness, the amount of time. Is it better to do Facebook instead, or some other kind of radio programs or something? So I think we're going to take a whole look at that kind of. And that's one aspect of communication, but then there's also kind of the collaboration among all the cruises and the agencies and everything as well. So, yes. So.
Yeah, and if I can follow up, maybe those are 2 separate things, because I really like where that effort has gone, because it's crunched data, so it takes time to get to that state. So I agree with you. I think there's maybe a separate opportunity that is just, hey, what are we doing and how do we collaborate? But again, I think there's multiple efforts trying to find that information.
Right.
Anyway, keep thinking about it.
Okay, I think we have reached our time today, and I want to thank the speakers. I want to thank Drew for your help in putting all this together and doing the survey and the survey results. And again, this has been recorded and will be available on the IARPC site. Candace, do you have any last thoughts here?
No, just thank you for the really great discussion that we had today. Really appreciate everyone being so engaged.
Yes, and then we'll be sure to share this with Roberto too, so that he's brought up to speed on that as well. And again, if you think of anything afterwards, just email Candace or myself, and we'll be continuing our discussion on this too as kind of the months go by. And Drew, can you just refresh me, when is the next time we're going to do an updated cruise report and actually circulate that publicly then? I think we were waiting for this meeting, and then we were looking at like mid to late April, something like that.
To circulate this, yes. So probably if there's any more changes that need to be done, if everyone could please let me know by next week. I really think we want to push this out by end of next week at the soonest, or yeah. So and then we'll start this process all over again.
Yeah. And if you have suggestions for other places to distribute it, let us know that as well. Otherwise, we're using, I think, our same distribution primarily as last year, unless we hear recommendations for other places to go to. So, and we will be beating up people and seeing what kind of maps or visuals we can attach to those, what you will allow us to put in. So, okay, well, thanks very much again, everyone, for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And I hope you all have the rest of your day is great. So thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye now.